July 31st, 1943. The biblical cities of Sodom and Gomorrah are synonymous with oppression, sin, and evil. Abraham requested that God destroy the city, sparing no one, not even the innocent, asking, "Will you sweep away the righteous with the wicked?" God sent angels to see if Sodom had enough innocents to be spared. They concluded it was not so. And then God rained sulfur and fire on Sodom and Gomorrah and all the plains and all the inhabitants of the cities and what grew on the ground. In 1943, Hamburg is Gomorrah, and Arthur Harris is the god of vengeance who shall sweep away the righteous and the wicked alike in a great storm of fire. Here's a word from the TimeGhost Army.
Never forget. Never give up. Never surrender. Join the TimeGhost Army.
This is War Against Humanity, a series of World War II in real time. I'm Spartacus, Olsson. Last week, we saw how the age for flak duty went down to 12 in some parts of Germany. The civilians in the Kursk Oblast continued to work under deadly circumstances on their defenses. A new concentration camp opened on the remains of the Warsaw Ghetto. In Italy, Rome was bombed for the first time, causing civilian casualties and deepening the popular crisis facing Mussolini's fascist regime. In Bengal, British India, the famine worsened while there was some hope for the starving in Iran. This week, the British colonial government takes action in Bengal against beggars. On July 30th, Governor of Bengal John Herbert issues the Bengal Vagrancy Ordinance that provides for the police to arrest any person who appears to be a vagrant. The ordinance is meant to address the growing problem of homeless beggars across the state and provide for them in vagrant homes where they are to be re-educated, fed, and medically treated. These vagrant homes are still under construction, though. So in Calcutta, those arrested and found by a magistrate to qualify as vagrants are put in a large warehouse on the east side of the city under dismal conditions, arguably even worse than the destitution they suffered in the streets. Even if they would be some kind of relief, there is only room for 1,000 vagrants, while by now tens of thousands of men, women, and children are forced to at least try to survive by begging in Calcutta alone. The number of people in this situation is growing explosively across all of Bengal, and in effect, the only thing the law achieves is to criminalize their last resort to any sustenance at all. And while the number of corpses continue to build up in Bengal, in Rome, Italian dictator Benito Mussolini's power has crumbled. Okay, this is a rough rendition of what has happened. Since the fall of Tunis earlier this year, there has been a multitude of conspiracies growing against Mussolini inside and outside the fascist party. The Italian king, Victor Emmanuel III, has been conspiring to get Mussolini out, to replace him with an army general willing and capable to seek an armistice with the United Nations alliance. His choice has been between Marshal Pietro Badoglio and Marshal Enrico Caviglia. Badoglio has been a faithful follower of the fascist movement and Mussolini ever since he was named the first governor of Tripolitania and Cyrenaica, or Libya, in 1929, where in the next 4 years he carried out a campaign to pacify anti-Italian resistance based on mass arrests, systematic torture, widespread oppression, and mass murder. He then went on to lead the Italian invasion of Ethiopia, where, among other atrocities, he had his forces use mustard gas to defeat Ethiopian Emperor Haile Selassie's army. After that, in 1936, he returned to his interim position as Supreme Chief of the Italian General Staff of the Armed Forces and formally joined the Fascist Party. Then, in 1940, he was held responsible for the failed invasion of Greece and retired from active military duty. Ever since, he secretly holds a grudge against Il Duce, who he feels was the real one to blame for the Hellenic debacle. He is, however, still a dedicated fascist. Caviglia served in the First World War and after alongside Badoglio, who abandoned Caviglia and his forces in battle when in dire straits on 2 occasions. Not only does he deeply dislike Badoglio, who he describes as a barn dog that goes where there is the biggest morsel, but is in many ways Badoglio's antithesis. He is openly opposed to fascism and considered one of the most honorable and capable veteran officers in the kingdom. he is also personally close to the king. But Caviglia is retired since much longer, and the king wants to maintain the fascist system, albeit without the fascist party, even after Mussolini is gone. So he lays down his bets on Badoglio. Meanwhile, inside the Grand Council of the Fascists, there are also forces conspiring to get Il Duce out of power. But Mussolini has one last chance on July 19th, when German Führer Adolf Hitler and generals of the German High Command, the OKW, come to Italy to discuss the joint defenses against the Allied invasion. Mussolini's brief from the Grand Council and the King is to inform Hitler in no uncertain terms that Italy is pulling out of the war. But when they are face to face, Il Duce literally doesn't dare tell the Führer, and the meeting, interrupted by the bombing of Rome, leaves Italy in a war that the Italians no longer want to fight. To make a long story short, Mussolini promises to write a firm and clear letter to Hitler, pulling Italy out of the war. But no one believes him anymore, and the Fascist Grand Council vote him out, hoping to hold on to formal power with one of their own members. The king thwarts these hopes by summoning Mussolini, firing him as prime minister, and appointing Badoglio in his place. Mussolini is arrested for his own safety. Italy breaks out in celebrations, and under the pressure of popular resistance, the fascist regime literally implodes in an unexpectedly completely peaceful transition of power. Nonetheless, the country is now helmed by a man that has, at least in direct practical terms, implemented even more fascist terror than Il Duce himself. The last word on the fate of the Italians has by no means fallen. And Italy is not the only place where popular opinion is putting a rift between the German Nazis and their allies this week. For a year now, trains full of foreign Jews who had fled to France before it fell have been leaving more or less regularly for the extermination camps in occupied Poland. Since long, the Nazis want the French Vichy government to also hand over Jews of French citizenship, especially those who acquired it after fleeing the Nazis to France before the war. Knowing that he would then face popular backlash, Vichy Prime Minister Pierre Laval has been holding back, saying that he can't just deliver Jews like goods from a market. Nevertheless, for the last year, French bureaucrats have been drafting a law which would denaturalize all Jews who have acquired citizenship since 1927, and on June 10, 1943, Pierre Laval signed the first two bills, set to become the law by publication this week on July 25th. But with the Allies on Sicily and Mussolini's fate sealed, Laval becomes wary. He stops the bills from publication in the Journal Officiel, which is constitutionally required for them to enter into legal effect. The SS immediately start dialing up the pressure on Laval to proceed. But as this week ends, he has not given in, protecting the lives of tens of thousands of French Jews for at least now. But as we saw a fortnight ago, SS Obersturmbannführer Adolf Eichmann, in charge of getting the Jews to the extermination factories, has already put contingency plans for mass arrests in place by requisitioning the Gestapo as his direct tool. With effective control of the Drancy transit camp outside of Paris since July 2nd, Eichmann's right-hand man, SS Hauptsturmführer Alois Brunner, has been rounding up Jewish POW, many foreign volunteers of the French army. Now, on July 30th, he expands his arrest to employees of the General Union of French Jews and elderly people from several old-age homes around Paris. On July 31st, a train with 1,000 Jews leaves the Drancy transit camp for Auschwitz. Before the train leaves, one of the deportees, Eva Golgevit, a Jewish resistance fighter, writes a letter. "I do not know where my son is, and yet I set out bravely. I am just a number, 360, in a locked car. But don't you worry, I am in high spirits and I absolutely intend to come back soon. We leave at dawn in 3 more hours." Upon arrival, the group of 1,000 is split in two. 218 men and 55 women are sent to the camps. They are tattooed and assigned to their barracks. The 727 other men, women, and children are selected to be murdered immediately in the industrial death machines that are the crematoria, which we saw come into full operation last month. Golgevit is not among them. She is sent to Block 10, reserved for prisoners destined for medical experiments under the direction of camp doctor Josef Mengele. His current focus is a rare, deadly, contagious disease called Noma that mainly occurs in children suffering from malnutrition. It's a form of gangrene caused by a variety of pathogens that afflicts the face, causing it first to bloat, then erupt into putrid ulcers that finally eat away parts of the face. Previously only known to occur in tropical regions, it started spreading in the Roma and Sinti family camp in June, which caught the doctor's interest. His team is now conducting live research on the sick, but also on healthy subjects by injecting them with various cultures of the pathogens to see what happens. Many infected children are murdered already before the disease kills them, so that their remains can be sent to the SS Medical Academy in Graz for further research. And while the German Nazis are hell-bent on burning down any humanity that is left, the United Nations allies are burning down German cities. On July 31st, the Battle of the Ruhr campaign is officially concluded after 2 raids on July 26th and July 30th. The former with 705 aircraft targeting Essen, resulting in 1,208 injured and 500 dead, including 165 civilian men, 118 women, 22 children, 22 servicemen, 131 foreign workers, and 42 prisoners of war. The last raid of the campaign is on Remscheid, where 273 aircraft destroyed 83% of the town, injuring 6,700 and killing 1,120. In total, the raids looked like a success for Bomber Command Chief Arthur Harris, with a good dozen German cities leveled, hundreds of thousands of homes destroyed, several million refugees, and 20,000 German civilians killed. He has fulfilled his stated goal to achieve the destruction of German cities, the killing of German workers, and the disruption of civilized life throughout Germany, the destruction of houses, public utilities, transport, and lives, and creation of a refugee problem on an unprecedented scale. What is so far not achieved is the ultimate goal to achieve the breakdown of morale both at home and at the battlefronts by fear of extended and intensified bombing. That German wartime production continues without decrease despite the bombing shouldn't concern him much, as he has stated that the previously mentioned are the accepted and intended aims of our bombing policy. They are not byproducts of attempts to hit factories. But Harris is far from done. And already this week, the next target ups the scale of destruction significantly. Hamburg is home to huge shipyards that have already constructed 200 U-boats as well as the now sunk Bismarck battleships. So while Harris might prioritize civilian destruction and death, the Air Ministry has marked Hamburg the next #1 priority. Harris and his planners have devised a plan to achieve both in a 10-day campaign comprising several major raids. Operation Gomorrah, aimed to destroy Hamburg completely. The chosen method is to create a firestorm. We've seen this happen on a couple of occasions before, for instance in Rotterdam when the German Luftwaffe bombed it in 1940 and in Wuppertal by the RAF this year. Although perhaps welcomed by the bombing force, they have all been unplanned consequences of the raids. In Hamburg, it is different. For several years now, both the RAF and the U.S. Army Air Force have been researching the most effective ways to destroy a city. In November 1941, the British Air Ministry established Research and Experiment Unit 8, tasking them to determine how best to create a firestorm on purpose, using the data from the USAAF, experience from the German bombing of British cities during the Blitz, and field experiments on scaled-down models of medieval German cities. By late 1942, the Air Ministry reports to now know how to achieve the complete destruction by fire of the built-up area of a city. The first raid on Hamburg is on the night from July 24th to 25th with 791 aircraft, and it is a preparation run. It also proves that a new defensive method, window, works. It's simple but effective. Beforehand and during the raid, the planes drop loads and loads of aluminium flares, disrupting German radar. Then, in roughly 50 minutes, the RAF planes drop 2,284 tons of bombs, many of them blockbuster bombs to create maximum physical blast damage on large structures. The number of deaths at this point is unclear, but the destruction is widespread, especially of defense and rescue capacity, creating the right conditions to seed the firestorm. Numerous fires already erupt, and the fire brigades are already facing challenges to contain them, with many houses burning into the next 2 days. In the following afternoon, the U.S. Army Air Force bombed industrial targets in Hanover and Hamburg. With fire brigades called away to assist in Hamburg from Hannover, the destruction there is widespread. Over Hamburg, the Americans face difficulties due to the massive amount of smoke already rising from the damaged city, and the raid is largely unsuccessful. The same day and the next, RAF Mosquito squadrons fly disruption raids to hamper any rescue and fire extinguishing efforts. On the ground, delayed timer bombs explode at irregular intervals, further hampering any work to stop the fires. Later that night, the main attack is supposed to take place, but again, the massive amount of smoke over the city makes it impossible. Instead, on the return leg to Britain, the RAF bombers drop their payloads on Essen in the raid I mentioned earlier. Then, on July 27th, it looks like the perfect night for the plan has arrived. The smoke cover has now lessened significantly. It hasn't rained in days, and there is only 30% humidity, much lower than the usual seasonal average. At 6 p.m., it's still 30 degrees Celsius outside. As the air temperature drops slightly in the evening, the hotter air, ground air, creates rising air currents that will help spread the fire. So shortly after midnight, 787 RAF planes dropped 2,326 tons of bombs on the city. Incendiary bombs are dropped with focus on the densely built-up areas of Hammerbrook, Borgfelde, Hamm, and other working-class districts. Firefighters are slow to respond, facing water shortages, broken down telephone communication, and rubble blocking the streets after the raid from 2 days earlier. Uninhibited, the erupted fires join together into multiple blazing infernos. Phosphor from the bombs spills into the streets, making them into canyons of fire. As the fires suck in oxygen from the air, they grow together into biblical proportions. Soon, a pillar of hot air extends 2 miles above the city, creating a funnel that sucks down colder air into the center of the fires. As the air comes into the center and from the sides, it moves the fire together into a huge spiral like a hurricane. The fire now starts pushing air through the streets and canals at speeds up to 240 kilometers an hour, so that it blows people away as if they were dry leaves. The air heats up to 800 degrees Celsius, the temperature when human flesh combusts. And as the fire starts rushing through the streets, it consumes every flammable material in its path. A gigantic tornado of fire soon extends to 300 meters above the city. Yet more air is sucked into the firestorm as it ravages the city in spiral after spiral, picking up ever more power. The oxygen is sucked out of some of the shelters where thousands are hiding, suffocating everyone inside. Anyone caught above ground is burnt away. People seeking refuge in the water in the numerous canals will sometimes be lucky and live through the firestorm as it rages above their heads. They can breathe when oxygen is sucked in through the canal system. Others will be less lucky when water surface oil spills from the damaged harbor ignites, burning them alive. Yet more will drown. Before the fires are put out and before the deaths can even be counted, the British bombers return. On the night of 29th to 30th of July, 707 bombers drop even more bombs than on the 27th. Firefighters can do little but watch as new fires erupt in the city, though it is nowhere near the likes of the firestorm from just days before. The last of the raids set for the next night on July 30th is cancelled due to bad weather over Great Britain and will instead take place next week, but it will be largely unsuccessful. That is, however, immaterial for Bomber Command, as the raids have already not only reached their combined goal, but also proven both that a firestorm can be created and that the window decoy defense works. The RAF has only lost 2.5% of its force, significantly below the average of 4% in the Battle of the Ruhr. It will take months for the Germans to assess the damage. By the end of the war, German authorities estimate that the raids destroyed 61% of Hamburg and suburb residential areas, and 1 million people were displaced. Hundreds of thousands are wounded, tens of thousands seriously, and 37,000 have died. Out of the remains that will be recovered, only 40% will ever be identified. The rest are burnt beyond identification, often to the point of being nothing more than a pile of ash. The vengeful among us will say that it serves them right. After all, their political leaders started this war. Their Luftwaffe did the same to Great Britain, Poland, and in the Netherlands. In their nation's name, a handful of men equipped with sidearms and machine guns killed only slightly fewer men, women, children, and infants in only 2 days at Babi Yar 2 years ago. And then they did that again, and again, and again, until millions had been murdered, and they're still doing it. The pragmatists among us will say that it's the terrible price that humanity has to pay to defeat the horror of Nazism. And even if it didn't work to do that, even if there was indication early on that it wouldn't work, at the time that couldn't be determined with any certainty. The lead architect of the horror inflicted on Hamburg civilians belonged to both groups. He was shown with evidential arguments that it would probably not win the war and that the price would be too high, both measured in dead aircrews and civilians. But he disagreed and fell back to that if nothing else it would be retribution, or as he said himself, they sowed the wind and now they are going to reap the whirlwind. That was also the popular majority sentiment that gave him the political support to proceed. It is perhaps understandable, even justifiable. But is that what we want to aspire to be? Vengeful pragmatists? Never forget.